So to walk you through a little bit of what we're going to talk about, we'll introduce you to ourselves, and we kind of already did that, but we'll reiterate. We'll talk about what networking is. Amy has a little networking example, which I think is a really good show and tell of the value of this kind of stuff. We'll talk about elevator pitches very briefly, but we actually already had a Wednesday workshop on it, so you can look it up on YouTube. And then we'll get to informational interviewing. So first, some quick introductions. I'm Allison Vibrett. I already told you that I work in the Office of Career and Professional Development at GSE, but I'm getting my master's in higher education as well. So, a first semester student just like you.
I'm Lisa. I'm also a master's in higher ed student, and I'm currently doing my graduate assistantship in Penn abroad, which is the study abroad office over on 37 Chestnut.
Come see all the cool things they do
Yes.
on their website. And I'm Amy, Director of GSE Career and Professional Development, and I'm proud alumna of GSE.
And to give you a little bit more context, we have a team of career advisors, which Lisa is a part of, and they're great, and you can get drop-in hours with them and with a lot of other people. So, oh, and now tell us about yourself, which you already did a little bit of.
Sure. So I'm Etolia. I'm a master's student in the TLL program, and I don't know what else, but
Tell us what your favorite dessert is.
my favorite dessert, oh my gosh, I love desserts, so it probably depends on the day, but usually something lemony is my jam.
What about key lime pie? Lemons and limes.
Key lime is cool,
Yeah.
but I probably prefer a lemon meringue.
Oh, and it's hard to find a good piece of lemon meringue pie.
Yeah.
Corner Bakery has amazing lemon bars. The crust is good, the texture is good.
Love a graham cracker crust.
This is a shortbread
Okay,
crust.
well, I love those too.
Oh, nice.
I don't discriminate.
That's
on that.
different.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So, with networking, how would you tend to define the word networking?
So I was a recruiter in my previous life before this, so I did a lot of networking with students, engineering students, and so I define networking as a relationship building process. It's not just the event that you're at in that moment that may offer a starting point for networking, but also a path to continuing a relationship of give and take, where you can offer advice or support to someone and get that same thing and same benefit in return.
I definitely agree with you. I totally think that it is a big relationship building tool, and we also like to describe it as a big research tool. I'm actually stealing your slide right
It's
now,
okay.
but that's fine. I think it's a great way to find out if you could see yourself in that person's shoes, if you could see yourself at that company, or if you could just see yourself in this industry in general. So relationship building, certainly, because I think you can get introduced to other people for them, but a lot of research in terms of your career comes from networking as well.
I've actually thought about changing the formula to networking equals relationships plus research.
I think that's a good
I like
idea.
that. I really like that.
Just write it down.
Because it is both.
Yeah.
And we have the technical definition of networking on here as well, which is the exchange of information or services among individuals, groups, or institutions. The cultivation of productive relationships, like you said, for employment or business. And a fun fact, the first known use of it was in 1967. If they ever asked you that in trivia.
Really?
I know, right?
Wow. Okay. Fun fact.
I'm going to pass the clicker to you for
Okay.
this one because it has many clicks.
It
And I want
does.
it to flow with your story.
So, this is probably my favorite example of how networking works, because I think a lot of times people assume they have to know somebody that's going to give them a job, and that's what networking is about. And yeah, that can be part of it, but it's so much more than that. So when I had graduated from my master's degree program in counseling psychology. I was back home and at church. And this is a photo of the church that my parents attend. And I was having a cup of tea after the service and chatting with Mrs. Gardner. I had babysat for Mrs. Gardner, Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, and their 2 kids, Tommy and Mary Ellen. And Mrs. Gardner asked, so, what are you up to? And I said, well, I was home and looking for a job, and here's the kinds of things I'm interested in, and I'd like it to be in higher ed. Well, I had forgotten that Mrs. Gardner was a math professor at the local community college, Corning Community College. And she told me that Corning Community College had just received grant money from New York State for a program that would help people on public assistance to earn a certificate or an associate's and then find employment and get off public assistance. And the program was looking for a career counselor. So I was trained as a counselor, hadn't really thought career counseling is what I wanted to specialize in, but thought, okay, what the heck? I could see myself as a career counselor, I'll apply. So I submitted a resume and cover letter, which, by the way, back in the day, I had typed up on a typewriter and taken to the printer to print out. Printer like a person, not like a piece of equipment. And I got an interview, and I was hired as the career counselor for the program. So I like to say that I got the job over a cup of tea at church. Now, in this example, Mrs. Gardner didn't give me the job. She just gave me, I had a relationship with her, and she gave me information about the job. And then with that information, I applied and got the job.
I also think this is a really important story because it shows that networking doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting coffee with someone you've never met before who is this role model figure. Networking can be a lot more casual than that in simple relationships that are already in existence. So, or family friends that you've had forever. So always stay on your toes because you never know who someone can introduce you to or what can come of a relationship.
And part of the other thing about this example is I wasn't chatting with Mrs. Gardner in the moment because I thought she would give me or tell me about jobs. I was chatting with her because we had a relationship. And then out of that conversation, I got the information.
That makes you think differently about the relationships you have now and the potential connections that the people
Yes.
you have relationships with.
Yes.
What that might lead you to. Just yesterday, I was on Facebook and I saw someone post something about a job in Japan that requires Japanese and English skills, bilingual skills. And I immediately remembered one of my college friends whose dream job is to work in an office in Japan, and she's fluent in Japanese and English. I was like, I don't know if you're still interested, but here's a job, so maybe apply. And yeah, it's like I haven't seen her in years, but just knowing her career interests and building off that relationship too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because Facebook really is more for socializing, and yet you found out about that opportunity based on the relationship, you forwarded it. I firmly believe in that 6 degrees of separation theory. So
I think it's also important to think about any conversation that you're having and making sure that your intents and your interests come across so that when people randomly come across job opportunities later, they remember, oh, so-and-so has interest in this, maybe I should share it with them. So making sure that folks know what your interests and intents are is also important too.
We had a session just last week on marketing and branding yourself, and a big element of that is standing for what you believe in, and making sure that you're sort of repeating the things that you're interested in again and again and again, so that people start to associate you with that thing.
Right.
So I totally believe in that.
and that you're always representing your product, out in public. So this is a perfect segue to the elevator pitch, which is generally speaking a 30 60-second summary of who you are, the career path that you're hoping to pursue, maybe a couple of the skills or qualities that you have. And the idea is that the length would be about the amount of time that you would be in an elevator ride with your ideal employer, theoretically. Or someone you meet and get talking and they ask about you. And top 10 reasons to hire me is a great way to draft your pitch. There's a great YouTube video connected to the hyperlink, and so using the top 2 or 3 reasons to hire you. And in the elevator pitch session, which you can find on the GSE YouTube channel, we go into much more detail about this.
Yeah. And I think if you haven't thought about your elevator pitch yet, take some time when you go home today to write that out, because it's a good thing to continue to repeat so that people start to associate you with your career.
Okay.
I'm going to take that back from you now.
Please do.
Mosey along. So another way that we like to describe networking and informational interviews is as information gathering, that research element. So this can be done at all sorts of locations, from career fairs to employer coffee chats to things that you set up on your own, but it also can be a lot more casual, like we've already discussed. And a lot of these informational gathering interviews come from connections on LinkedIn and QuakerNet, which we'll get to in a little bit. But we find out of every 10 or so networking conversations, students have about 2 to 5 valuable takeaways from that. So obviously, sometimes when you go for a networking coffee, you discover, maybe I can't see myself in that position, or maybe I wouldn't want to work for that company, and that's totally fine. That's part of the reason why you go for an informational interview. You don't want to get yourself in a position where you're working at a company and you find out that you hate it then. And that happens too, and that's also fine. But this is a really good way for figuring out if you can see yourself somewhere. So another important thing is that this first information gathering moment is not a moment for you to come in and say, hey, do you have a job for me? Or hey, anything like that, basically. It is that moment where you build that relationship and you gather that information. But of those 2 to 5 conversations that you do find value from, all of them are value, but you get what I'm saying. You can go back to them later on, have a second conversation, a third conversation, whatever it might be, and ask them, how do you suggest I find openings? Because that is an open-ended question, and it provides them with the opportunity to say, oh, well, there's actually an open position at my company that I think you'd be a great fit for. Or, oh, I have a friend who works at this other company, and they're looking for someone. So it kind of opens the realm of possibilities for you. Anything you'd add, Amy? Or Lisa?
2 thoughts that came to mind, and I made notes so I can update it. GSE now has its own LinkedIn page, and so you can affiliate your degree with the Penn GSE LinkedIn page. It still stays affiliated with Penn broadly, but it makes it a little easier to find GSE alums, and there is a discussion piece, and people can use that to post jobs. The other thing, I'll just give you a little, I was going to say foreshadowing, it's not exactly foreshadowing, sneak peek, I guess. In January, if all goes well, we're going to be launching a platform called Penn GSE Connects that's going to make it even easier for you to connect with GSE alumni. And the alumni will be able to tell you the type of assistance they're willing to offer. So in some cases, maybe they will only offer to talk about their job, but they might not offer to give you job search advice. Or they'll critique your resume, and they will also indicate the topics that they're willing, qualified, interested in talking about. So more will be forthcoming on that once we know it's absolutely ready to go.
Cool. And this is just a slide to convey the value of these conversations. Networking is actually the largest source of our students at GSE for finding jobs. So we definitely encourage everyone to get out there and meet people and have conversations. So, Lisa?
Great. So let's say that you found the person that you want to do an informational interview with, and you emailed them, and I think Allison is going to go over kind of talking specifically about how to find the right person, how to email them, how to approach them, and everything. But let's say that you have already found that person and you're preparing for this informational interview. Whether you are talking to them in person, a chat over a coffee, or doing it over Skype or something like that, you want to make sure that you are researching the person that you're speaking with. And usually they have at least like a picture and their title on a website for the company or the school that they're working for. So that's a place to start, just to kind of see what kind of information that they have. You can look on their LinkedIn page to look at what they're doing currently and what they have done in their past. And definitely based on what you have seen and what you have researched, prepare various different kinds of questions that will drive the conversation. So you can ask about things about the person individually, like how did you get to where you are now, and how did you find that you were passionate about this field or this kind of position. Just ask about different kinds of questions about their current position, but also their past, and also about the history or the particular company, the culture of the company, and maybe different things that they want to share with you. It's very important to be genuine and authentic, and I think one thing after doing various informational interviews with people over time is I like to think of informational interviewing not so much as like question, answer, but it's really like an organic, flowing conversation, which is why I think this whole being genuine and authentic piece is so important, because you want to make sure that you're not just thinking about like, oh, I want to learn everything and take as much as I can get out of this informational interview, which is part of the purpose, but at the same time, really wanting to put yourself forward and think about ways in which you can kind of jump off of things that they are saying, and then also talking about ways to incorporate your top 10 reasons about why they should hire you or why they should consider you or think about you in the future. So yeah, I think I just do as much like research as possible. Speaking from personal experience, I was actually on Locust Walk and I saw this really cute dog. And I asked the owner if I could pet the dog, and then we started having this conversation over her dog. And then she started asking me, oh, like, are you a student? What are you doing here? And so I told her, yeah, I'm actually a master's in higher ed student, and this is the program that I'm in. And she said,
Your elevator pitch.
yeah, exactly. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. So I used to work for Temple as one of their like deans, but I was more interested in international education. I'm like, how perfect! I am also interested in international education. And so from there, we were able to, we exchanged information and we were able to set up an informational interview. And it's interesting because she was very high up in her like university that she worked at. And so if you know anything about higher ed, is that especially in larger universities, there's so many different schools and like organization structures is very complex. And so I did not do my research about Temple and about the organization structure. So as I was asking her all these questions, she could tell that I didn't do enough research. I might have done research about her specifically and about her past and her interests, and I could ask the right questions about her journey. But in terms of like framing it within her experience working in that specific institution, she could tell that I wasn't as knowledgeable about organizational structures in higher ed in general. So she called me out and she was like, you did not do your research about Temple. But I was very thankful that she was very blunt and upfront with me, because from then on, with all the other informational interviews, I was able to do my research in a more holistic and thorough manner, so that I show them that I have done the research and I'm here prepared. I'm not just here to like try to grab things from you when I could easily find that on the internet.
And I think one way to sort of mitigate that is, again, going back to this genuine and authentic point, if you are new to higher ed, or whatever field it might be, it's okay to say, I'm not as familiar as I hope to be about this area. Can you tell me more about it, blah, blah, blah. To a certain degree, I think if it's available online, obviously do the research. But if it's not available online, but you don't want to come off as unknowledgeable, yeah, it's okay to acknowledge that, I think. Oh, and one other thing that I thought of while you were going over this slide, one method that I use to try to incorporate some of my experience while I'm in an informational interview is actually during the questioning, and I'll say something along the lines of, in my experience doing X, Y, and Z, I noticed this. Could you tell me about your experience with that here at this company? So you're touting a little bit of your experience, but also getting the information that you need to move forward.
Very strategic.
Thank you so much. So who do you reach out to? Amy began to plug this already, but there is a University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education LinkedIn page. I think it's a great tool to find other past alums to reach out to, and even current students. And many of our alumni are willing to have conversations with our current students and talk about their experiences, whatever that might be. So I definitely encourage people to take a look at this page. You can sort for people's location, certain fields, even certain company names. And so if you're looking for something very specific, this is a great way to get there. And in a few slides, I'll go over what it might look like when you reach out to someone that you're not already connected with on LinkedIn. So stay tuned for that. Another really great resource for finding people to reach out to is QuakerNet. Are either of you familiar with QuakerNet? Yes? Okay. So it's sort of like almost Penn's version of LinkedIn, I guess, kind of. But you can get access to all of our alumni who have been willing to share their contact information, and again, sort off of industry and location and all of those sorts of filters. So another really great tool for finding people who have a similar background as you, or people who have a similar background for what you're hoping to go into.
The one caveat I always tell people is, on QuakerNet, the alumni aren't necessarily volunteering to be contacted. So it's possible you could reach out to somebody who really just wants to be left alone, or, you know, but they've at least made their information public to the Penn community. And with LinkedIn, at least you know they are interested in networking. You might not know all the ways they're willing to help. And that's why we're really excited about Penn GSE Connects, because that will be kind of, you'll get all of that.
Yeah. So let's say you find someone on LinkedIn, or you get an email from another colleague, or you find someone on QuakerNet, whatever method it might be, and you're about to send them an email introducing yourself to set up a networking coffee or event. This is a really good template to follow, and it's on the Penn Career Services website. Obviously, you don't have to follow it word by word or anything like that, but it outlines what you can include in your first paragraph, your second paragraph, and how you should close the pitch that you're making to that person. So you're really telling them a little bit about yourself, and then explaining your background and why you want to talk to them. That's a really good thing to follow across any method that you're reaching out to someone, even if it has to be more condensed than this. Which it does have to be if you're reaching out to them on LinkedIn. So let's say you have a dream company that you want to work for, and you've discovered someone who works in the head of that division at that company on LinkedIn. And you're obviously not connected yet, but you want to get your foot in the door and learn about the institution. You can send them a request to connect, and generally when you have that, when you're making that connection request, you have about, I think it's 250 characters to write to them, which is a really condensed space. So our last year GA in the Office of Career and Professional Development was reaching out to someone on LinkedIn in this situation, and she just told them a really small bit about herself. My name is Kelly, I'm an aspiring career services professional, so they know who she is. And I'm getting my degree at Penn, and I would like to connect with you. That's kind of all you need to say. 9 times out of 10 people will ultimately connect with you, and I find for the 1 out of 10 who don't, they probably just aren't checking their LinkedIn, so don't get too offended by that. And in this case, this person reached out, said it's a pleasure, and that they would be completely willing to chat. And then as you see, the conversation flowed onward, and Kelly asked for a quick informational interview while being very aware of this person's time, and they were able to set up a conversation and chat. So I think it can be a little intimidating when you're reaching out to someone that you've never met, and a bit daunting, especially if they are higher up than what your position would be. But just remember that at one point in time, they were in your shoes as well. We're all just people, so don't be too intimidated by anyone out there in the professional world.
Can I just add something about like reaching out to someone and asking to like chat or something? So I found that in the past it would be really nice in your initial contact or the email to talk about not only why you're interested in what they have done or what they're doing, but also talk a little bit about yourself and like how your interest connects with theirs, so that they're not just seeing that, oh, like I'm just someone that's going out and trying to like figure out different things, but that you're really being intentional about connecting. This is what I'm interested in. You're also doing this, so I really want to connect with you specifically about this. I've also found that, and this may not be applicable for everyone, but I've heard from several professionals that when people have asked them for informational interviews or sit down to chat, they like to use the phrase, I like to pick your brain, and a lot of professionals really hate that apparently, and they say that like, what does that mean that you want to pick my brain, and or that they feel like it almost feels like it's like encroaching on them a little bit. So going back to being intentional about specifically what you're interested in and how have your personal experiences really really encouraged you to explore more about that particular career interest or that field, and then connecting it to what they have done rather than saying broadly, I just want to pick your brain about your job. I think that creates more of a more personal connection. Have you heard that? Like,
I haven't heard that, but I can imagine how pick your brain, which is in the English slang. Do you know what that means?
To know exactly what they found? I don't know, I just.
So it's like, I want to hear your ideas. If you think of it literally, it's kind of like, ooh, that's gross.
Yeah.
But pick your brain could be code for, I want to know if you know of any job openings. Or they might think it's code for that. And yeah, I liked how Kelly, for example, said, so he graduated from GSE, so she made that connection. And then he must work in career services in some capacity, so she referred to that as well. I think a nice way to phrase it can be, you know, I'm a student and I'd love to hear your career story. And here's some specific questions I have for you. And also notice she said 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you can even say 15 minutes, the conversation might go longer, but if you initially said, could I talk with you for 30 minutes or an hour? They might be like, oh, no, but 15 minutes, we've all got probably 15 minutes we can squeeze in somewhere.
Showing that you're aware of their other commitments is super important and very courteous. But yeah, I think the explanation point, especially in this first message in LinkedIn, is difficult because of the constraints. So I think Kelly did a really great job here of just saying who she is, because that implies why she would have reached out to this person. So she is an aspiring career services professional, and so this person who works in career services would understand, oh, okay, well that's why she wants to talk to me. So,
And personally, I don't like getting the generic LinkedIn message, you know, that's already pre-written. Hi, I'd like to add you to my network, or whatever it is. Because sometimes, depending, I might not remember how I know you. Or maybe I don't know you at all, but one of my colleagues suggested connecting. So I might connect with you if a colleague suggested it. If I get a request and I just don't know who it is or how I know them, I don't usually reply to it. So give the person a little bit of context.
yeah. And the other really important thing to remember here is that this is just a connection request, right? So it isn't that first message asking for the informational interview, it's simply to form this relationship. So that's why she went into a little bit more detail. But great tool. Lisa?
oh yes. So you set up an interview, you had the informational interview, and it went great, hopefully. So what do you do afterwards? Don't just, say bye and then you never see them again. Always send a thank you note. So whether it is a follow-up email, that could just be a few sentences brief, that is always good to just kind of acknowledge that the conversation happened and that you really appreciate their time. So refer to the conversation. If you feel like, let's say 15-20 minutes with the person was not enough and you feel like the conversation, you could use more time with that person, you want to learn more, you can always find a time to meet again. And if they say, oh, I'm really busy, or like, no thank you, you can still thank them for their time regardless. And then you can always follow up with specific things that maybe they have mentioned. So maybe they gave you a contact information, they gave you a contact for someone who you might be interested in talking to. So ask them for their contact information. If there is like a particular project that they've been working on that's really interesting, I don't know, whatever else that you really want to follow up more on and like dig deeper into, you can follow up with them and then they can give you more information about that, or just like, here's a link to something that I referenced in our informational interview. So basically in the follow-up, thank them, acknowledge them, and say like, I really appreciate your time, and then if there's anything from the interview that you want to briefly follow up on, that's also a good time to.
I heard a great tip from someone, and it kind of speaks to the be genuine and authentic and developing relationships. People can feel disappointed, frustrated if the only time you reach out after that is because you want something, help, or, you know. I mean, they understand the nature of the relationship, but still, it can be frustrating and disappointing. So this colleague suggested, whether you need anything or not, contact your best contacts at least twice a year. And she said, if you know their birthday, wish them a happy birthday and give them a little update on what you're up to with no request. And then in the new year, because you don't know what holidays people might celebrate or not celebrate, or so the new year could be a nice opportunity to say, Happy New Year. Again, here's a little bit of what I've been up to, or, oh, I saw your article on, or so no purpose other than staying connected.
I think, I actually was just thinking of one of my most valuable connections the other day because someone mentioned something that reminded me of her, right? So I think those like really authentic moments are good to capitalize on.
Yeah, so you could shoot off a note, hey, I was thinking about you today, somebody said this, here's how it made me think about you, hope you are well.
And that's it. But yeah, I think maintaining those relationships throughout your career is so important because you never know when they might pop up again or might become beneficial again. Very good point. So we're going to do a little activity, and there are only two of you, so you're going to partner together. But do you happen to have, well, you have your phone, okay. So, and I can see you have your laptop. We're going to take 5 minutes, and I'm going to have each of you identify someone that you want to reach out to network with. So kind of getting this informational interviewing process on its wheels. After the 5 minutes are up, we'll go to the next couple of tasks because I don't want to give you too many right now. So feel free to take out your whatever device you might have and start looking around. If you have any questions throughout the process, let us know.
Twickernet, LinkedIn, whatever works for you.
I love LinkedIn for searching, simply because of the filters. I think it allows you to really narrow things down.
And I also like that if you know people in common,
Mm-hmm.
it shows you that.
Mm-hmm. And you might already have someone in mind, which will be convenient here. about 2 more minutes. How are people doing?
Keep in mind too, the person doesn't have to be, and probably shouldn't be, the head of the organization. You probably want to find somebody that's in a role that's more similar to the role you might apply for eventually. That person probably also has more time available than President Gutman, for example, if you wanted to know what it's like to work at Penn.
And knows a lot more about what you would be doing, so it would be a lot more helpful for that research piece.
So right now we're just picking a person?
Yes. So about 1 more minute, and then we're going to share who the person is. We're changing this activity slightly given the size of the room. Another good reminder is the person doesn't necessarily need to be out in the field right now. It's also really valuable to network with people that are right here at Penn GSE, so keep that. Do you each have someone?
I have 2 seconds.
You have someone?
I didn't decide to choose one.
Well, that's okay. Do you
But
guys
you
wanna-
found some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, yeah. So tell us about who you chose or who you have on your list.
So the first person is Kristen Horns-Coins, and she is a PhD student here in the Ed Leadership program. And I'm interested in her because she's a board certified teacher, and she's worked in K through 12 and K through 6 curriculum development. And because I want to create an after-school program that's focused on K through 8, I think she would be a good person for me to speak to about the kind of like the foundations of practical critical curriculum development and what it takes to put together a holistic lesson.
Definitely.
Yeah, and honestly, that I found now I decide I made
Okay.
mine. I think the name is Jing Wei, and she is I think it's she, and she graduates from Penn GSE, and she's also the TESOL program because I wanted maybe work in an international school. She's Chinese, and so we have similar background. And she's now back to China and worked in an international school which is called Montessori, and from 2014. So I think she has like 5 years experience. So it is not that high. It is someone who has time to talk to me.
Yeah.
And you already have things that you can connect on.
Yeah.
School. Awesome. So that's great that you guys have already chosen those people, and it seems like the wheels are turning for why you've chosen them. So I want to give you all 5 minutes to think about what the note will say when you reach out to them. And think about it as that connection note, since it seems like both of these are on LinkedIn, and also that second note asking for the actual chat. It's like we're doing all the work here together, so after this you can just hit send. is going to LinkedIn and searching their name
Okay.
and see what comes up.
Or maybe you can search up the school that she works at supposedly
Yeah.
and see if they have a staff directory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Don't take no for an answer.
Always dig.
Any luck?
I just started working on my phone.
Oh. Well, you can draft a note
Yeah.
without the contact information for now, and then you can look for it.
About 2 more minutes. About 1 more. so you might not be done with the note, and that's totally okay. But it looks like you both got started with them. So do you want to share some pieces of the note with us? Of what you're planning on saying? You can go first.
So I said, "Hi, Kristen. My name is Etolia. I'm an aspiring entrepreneur and master's student at Penn GSC. I'm interested in connecting with you and learning more about your experiences." And in the follow-up message, I said that I want to design an after-school program that focuses on practical life skills for K through 8 students. I'm new to the education field, and I would love to hear your thoughts on curriculum development and leadership in education. Can we meet to chat over coffee?
I think that's great. I think you included information about yourself and provided that context as to why you would be reaching out to them because of your interests, and also included some specifics about what you hope to get from them, which is discussing information that they've gathered from their own background. So, I think those are all good points. Bye.
Hi, Jingzi. I'm Ziyang, a first-year TESOL student from Penn GSC. I'm from China and I really love Shanghai. I'm interested in teaching in international school. I have taught English and Chinese before, but I'm not sure what kind of people they are looking for. I'd appreciate if you can tell me a little about how did you get your job.
I think that's also good. I would maybe cut out the piece about I'm not sure what they're looking for, because it might seem like you're just talking to her for a job. But I think the last piece brings it back and is good, that you're just trying to connect. And I love the piece that I love Shanghai. Is that where the school is?
Yes.
I think that's like a nice personal touch, which is great. So, do you guys have any other feedback that you'd like to give? Great. So, the last little bit of the activity is coming up with a few questions that you would ask that person. I have 5 here, might be less, might be more. But it's a really great way to get yourself thinking about, okay, so what happens when I'm in the chair at the coffee chat? What do I say then? Or on the phone. So yeah, come up with a few questions that you'd ask that person, and then we'll talk through those as well. 2 more minutes. You guys have a few questions written down? Cool. So, would you like to share some with us so we can provide feedback? You want to go first this time?
Oh, yeah, sure. So actually I have 6 questions.
Productive couple of minutes.
So the first one is, what make up your mind to decide to become a teacher?
Mhm.
The second one is, how did you get your job? The third one is, and the second one is also combined is, what is your previous experience? Yeah. And third one is, what do you do every day? Would you please describe your routine? Yeah. And the fourth one is, what do you think about your job? Do you like it? And the fifth one is, what is the culture in your school? I mean, the working culture. Yeah. And the last one is, what do you think will be a career path for a teacher?
I think the one on what do you like about your job, sometimes when I'm trying to get to that question, I'll ask someone what their favorite things and their least favorite things are about the position that they're in, or what are some pros and cons, because I also think it's really important to hear the other side of that question, right? To hear what the faults are. And it's a bit of a provocative question that really forces people to think, but exposes more information than meets the eye. So there's a tip there. Any other feedback on that?
I was gonna say, it might highlight something that you hadn't thought about before that you might wanna consider once you start looking for jobs. So if it's, gee, there's no administrative support. So I've gotta do all of the, I'm making it up, photocopying and ordering supplies and so on myself, and that takes away time from, preparing to teach. I don't know, so that would be something to think about.
And also on your other question about how did you find your job? Or I can't remember which one made me think of this, but another good question that you could ask is, what are some things that you did while you were a student at Penn that you found really beneficial to kickstarting your career? Because then you could start doing some things, which is pretty nice.
And you can maybe connect over common experiences, like, oh, she took a class that you are taking right now, or you know a mutual professor or something like that.
I like the flip side of that question too. What's something you wish you had done while you're at GSE?
Yep.
Because then depending on where you are in your program, you might still have time to do it.
Definitely agree with that. How about your question?
Okay,
You don't have to list all of them either, but
so I kind of put mine in like a conversation conversational format, so to like lead into the questions. So I started with, I know that you did some curriculum design work a few years ago in Boston. What is it like to design curriculum? What are some of the challenges that you faced? Having here, social emotional learning is a big or a hot topic these days in education. How did you incorporate social emotional learning into your curriculum design? Because I want to be an entrepreneur, I'm currently a team of one, but as I expand my business with new employees, what do you think are the most important things to do as a leader in education? I also included, do you think that there's a need for practical skills education for K-8 students? And do you know anyone else that I should connect with?
Love that last question. I think that's a really important element, especially as an entrepreneur, because that network is so valuable. I also really liked your first question, I think it was, but it showed that you did research on her background and you know where her skills lie and experience lies, which is a key element of the conversation, as Lisa talked about. The other thing that I loved was when you spoke to expanding your business and some of the stuff that you're doing, because it talked to those top 10 reasons kind of things, or the most valuable skills that you have, and gave more information about yourself, which is another really important element of information.
I'll just save this
And get to it, right? And let us know how the conversation goes. And I hope that you're able to find the contact information for your person too, because they seem like an amazing fit for what you're hoping to do afterwards. So that's all for the activity, but I do encourage you both to follow through on this and continue doing this searching and question formulating and all of that, because as you saw earlier in the presentation, you know, one conversation might not be the end all be all. It's really about continuing to have these conversations. So keep doing them and come see us to talk about them. So you can make an appointment on Handshake. We've been over this before. I know that you're one of our regulars, but are you familiar with Handshake? Okay, cool. So yes, we encourage everyone to come see us, and if you hit a block in the road, we're there to help. So, but thank you both for coming today.
Thank you.